Hey guys, what's happening? So now getting into the death metal SpeedMetal one-shot, which continues the chase within the Speed Force with the Darkest Night chasing after Wally, Barry, and Jay. And I like that it's here in SpeedMetal that we finally get the resolve between Barry and Wally that had nearly torn them apart in Flash War. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so getting into SpeedMetal, like one of the first things that I really appreciate is like the way that it starts off and how it's very reminiscent to the return of Wally West and how it was delivered in the Rebirth one-shot. And for you guys that's been rocking with me for a minute, like like ever since the Rebirth one-shot, like together we have been hunting for connections and just waiting for things to play out that were teased. In that Rebirth one-shot, it primed us for a lot of things. And at the time, Jeff Johns was mainly teasing Doomsday Clock, but aside from that, we were waiting for the return of Shazam. We got the tease back then for 3 Jokers, which back at the time in 2016, it felt like it had a much clearer connection to Darkseid War. And it's like now with us finally getting our hands on that 3 Jokers series and making our way to the conclusion, I feel like a lot of people are still waiting for that clearer connection to that story, or better yet from that story to the rest of the continuity. But although we haven't gotten it specifically within 3 Jokers, SpeedMetal kinda does it in its own way, because when SpeedMetal starts off, Wally's thinking back from the moment he returned up to now, which at the time Wally appeared before Bruce while he was investigating the 3 Jokers. And even though it doesn't give us like a specific point in time as far as when the 3 Jokers picked up, but with us once again getting a reference to the Rebirth one-shot, it's almost like DC saying, okay, we're gonna fit it in somewhere, just wait for it. But with it kind of speeding through Wally's history and starting from there, and mainly because that's where the connection to Dr. Manhattan had happened, after Wally had been trapped in the Speed Force by Abracadabra, and Dr. Manhattan had tampered with the DC universe while Wally was in there. But as we continue through the monologue that we get from Wally, to where he expresses how from that moment there's been a number of residual effects. And with the way that he describes it, it's either like the things that were missing, either from the time that he was gone, or the people that didn't remember him when he came back, and a lot of those effects and feelings just rolled over through Titans and into Flash War, to where in that case then his children were missing, but then that it also brought a clash between him and Barry, which at the time seemed like it was more about how to fix the situation. But even back then we knew that there's way more layers that had been boiling up with their friendship, and with Wally personally adjusting after his return. And then jumping over to Heroes in Crisis, which was supposed to be his moment of rehabilitation, but instead it was quite the opposite, to where everything had just stacked up and he had broke. He had lost control, taken a number of lives, and with trying to fix it by his own means, it had only made things worse. And at the time when this had happened, Wally had lost confidence in his powers, he lost confidence in himself and his decision making, which had then taken his mind to so dark of a place that it had over flooded the dark multiverse, causing Wally's nightmare Earth to spill over dark energy and grow at a speedster rate with his unique connection to the Speed Force, which then forced him to be a hero again because he was the only person who could fix this, which is really the gift and the curse of being Wally West. But then from there, going into the conclusion of Flash Forward, we then find that the solution for Wally's mind in stopping this dark multiverse crisis, and when this happened he was given the decision like either he dies and stops the dark energy, which would also trap his kids in the dark multiverse, or he can choose to sit in the Mobius chair, which would then assist him as a solution for his mind to keep the nightmares at bay. But then there was also the risk of the chair taking over Wally and him losing himself and all that knowledge, which he then viewed as the possibility of losing his children again. But then as we know, Wally sat in the chair, and with doing this he had then discovered that Dr. Manhattan had pretty much seen all of this playing out, and he had left a portion of his power in the chair for Wally. But Manhattan had also did this because he had chosen Wally, who he knew would make his way to the Mobius chair, but also with him arriving here he wanted to give Wally the power and the means to sort out the multiverse and all the overlapping realities. But then in the process of doing so, this is where like your Generation Zero, air quotes, comes in, because while Wally was fixing the timeline and sorting out the overlapping realities, the Batman Who Laughs had then used the power given to him by Perpetua, removed Wally from the chair, and then taken him as his own prisoner going into death metal. But then after that, Wonder Woman broke Wally out of his prison, and with doing so she was caught by the Batman Who Laughs, who she killed at the time with her invisible chainsaw, unaware that it would trigger his contingency to become the Darkest Night. But aside from it being a contingency, it really and truly feels like it was his plan the whole time. But from here, as we continue into SpeedMetal, we've come to the point to where the Darkest Night, he's come after Wally to get that remaining portion of Dr. Manhattan's power, of which Wally was given to correct the timeline in the multiverse. And initially, Wally goes with Barry and Jay into the Speed Force to get away from the Darkest Night, because this is where Barry had hid prior to this point throughout Death Metal SpeedMetal while also trying to find other speedsters. But while they're in here, they're really stuck in this situation because they can't jump to other Earths or go back in time because of the condition of the Speed Force and Perpetua having destroyed a majority of the multiverse. But it's not long after this where they're then joined by Kid Flash, who had felt all of them using the Speed Force, so he had jumped in and joined them. But not long after, with the sound of like a ton of war drums, the Darkest Knight had then sent through his horde of Dark Flashes. And he had did this not so much for the reasoning of outrunning Wally and the others, but rather for them to enter into the Speed Force and burn it up at a much faster rate. Because even now with Wally and the others kind of playing this game of keep away with Wally, but not everyone is able to keep as far as a gap away from the Dark Horde. And we see that especially in the case of Jay, who's the first one that they get their hands on. But even with this happening, Barry is able to go back for him and then help him catch up with the others. But because they're running out of time with the Speed Force dying out, plus the addition of the Dark Horde biting at their heels, it's here where Wally then uses a bit of improvisation in order to buy them some time to figure out the next move, but also on top of that, help some of these guys catch their breath. And with doing this, he makes the call and he uses the Speed Force formula, which is a formula that was discovered by Johnny Quick, which would in normal circumstances stop time and everything around them. But in this case, it really just creates a barrier between them, the Horde, and the Darkest Knight. And it's effectively stopping time, but it's not necessarily buying them the time that they need. Because for one, with using the Speed Force formula, it still uses the Speed Force. And then on top of that, it's still draining Kid Flash and the others. And then along with this, you have the Darkest Knight, who's leaning on the barrier and looking for weaknesses trying to find a way in. But also with Wally making this call, Barry then begins to give a bit of his critique, and when doing so, calling out the flaws in this plan without making a better suggestion, which then fires up the argument between these two. But before they get too far into it, Kid Flash then tells them that they possibly have another option, being that they've arrived at the Flash Museum. And Kid Flash suggests that hopefully they can find something here that'll help increase their speed. But then it's here where Barry shoots that idea down because he already came here and he searched and there was nothing here. Like no other speedsters, nothing. But it's also here like with Barry and Wally going back and forth, and like when Jay asks like what exactly is this, like what's going on, and Kid Flash then tells Jay like here we go again, this is just like Flash War. And it really does seem that way like on the surface, because back at the time Wally's kids were missing and Wally wanted to use time travel, but Barry told him no because he knew the risks that could come from it. And between then and now, it looks like the same type of argument, like Wally makes a decision and Barry just shoots it down. But I like that through the course of SpeedMetal, like Williamson gives us the true meaning of this argument and the solution as the story progresses. Because while they're here outside the museum, Barry makes the critique that if Wally hadn't used the Speed Force, then they could have gotten further away. But then Wally, he's like, you know what, we need to turn around, go through them, and head straight back to the Mobius chair. And once again, Barry shoots his idea down, because all he's thinking about is running away and getting further from the Darkest Knight. And it's quite the opposite of what Barry has taught Wally in the past, but now it's like that's all that he wants to do. And it's here where Wally goes into the Flash Museum, saying that he'll run alone, again, which for Wally's a bit frustrating because in the past, and more so the recent past, it's been a road that he's much often had to take. But when Wally walks into the museum, Jay tells Barry, go get him, you dummy. So then Barry's like, okay. But then when Barry goes in, this is when the layers start to peel back. Because initially Barry goes in to apologize, but Wally opens up to him and he lets Barry know, like regardless of all that Wally's done, filling in his shoes, saving the multiverse, fighting with the Justice League, like he's always still felt like he was in Barry's shadow. And even with him being faster than Barry, he feels like he's still trying to catch up. But it's here where we get down to like the true core of what they've been bickering about. Because in the case of Barry, he wants to protect Wally. He doesn't want to lose him again. And that's mainly why he had shot down everything that sounded so risky, because he had wanted to keep Wally safe. But then on the other hand with Wally, he just wanted Barry's support, which is what he got after having this talk with Barry. And when we see this, it's like the miscommunication has been the whole point the whole time. Because even when Wally's not right, he needs to know that Barry has his back. And even if he doesn't have the solution, he at least needs to know that Barry's gonna go to war with him. But it's here where Barry agrees to go with Wally's plan and they go back outside. And when this happens, the Darkest Knight, he slithers through like the cracks of their barrier, and all it really does in this instance is change their clothes. And it puts them in the death metal drip. But even with this happening, like these guys are lucky that this wasn't Lord Beerus from like Dragon Ball Super, because one tap is all he needs. Like these guys would have been out of here. But in this case, nothing was really affected except for their appearance, so they're good. But just before they take off, there's a bit of heartfelt chatter and like Jay talking about he never had kids and how these guys feel like family, and Kid Flash even teases on how he always wanted to race these guys. But let's be real, we know who's gonna win. Like it's not even a question here. But from here, they then run in the direction of the Darkest Knight, through the horde, and back in the direction of Castle Bat towards the Mobius chair. And initially the Darkest Knight, he's a little confused, like where are these guys going, like you're not about to take me out, but it isn't too long before he then figures out that these guys are heading for the chair. But with them doing this and the Darkest Knight breathing down their neck, there are also still a number of obstacles ahead of them aside from the horde that they had to run through, who are still chasing them at this point. Because one, on their way back, it's pretty much like running through a labyrinth, not to mention you got your Dark Robins all in the street, and as if the combination of those two wasn't enough, which are already slowing them down, but you then have the case of the Nightmare Batman once you get closer to Castle Bat. And it's after this where we come to the point to where Jay, he can't keep up, and neither can Kid Flash, and after that it really just comes down to Wally and Barry. And even at this point, Wally's been trying to use some of the Crisis energy to boost him and go a bit faster, but even still that's not enough. But then it's also here where Barry reassures Wally that he had made the right choice with going against what Barry had said with choosing to run towards the chair. And this is really another big moment for Wally once again, especially coming out of Flash Forward and dealing with the struggles of running alone and not trusting his own judgment. So for Wally getting the support from his mentor and one-time idol, like that's huge. But then on top of that, Barry tells Wally that he can do this, but don't use the Crisis energy, use his speed. On top of Wally's speed, which not only will make Wally faster than ever, but also much like the inscription on the watch which Barry had given him that said every second is a gift, with Barry giving Wally his speed in this clutch moment, which then make that statement more literal than ever. But also with this happening, it's like that moment where we realize if any one person was able to do this, it was Wally. And not only because he's the fastest speedster, but really like with prior to this point and all those thoughts of him being second to Barry, or even running in his shadows, like that was all in his head. And when it came down to it, Barry recognized Wally's greatness and he did what needed to be done by giving Wally his speed, knowing that it had to be him. But with Wally moving forward and focusing on the things that give him hope, which are the family, he then makes his way to the Mobius chair first. And I remember a few of you guys were in Discord saying like what Wally really wanted to do right here and how he really only wanted to put one finger up, which I'm pretty sure this issue was drafted that way at one point in time. We'll probably never know, but I'm pretty sure that at least hit the editor's desk at some point in time. But after Wally makes his way to the chair, it's here where he gets that familiar feeling, much like the last time that he was trapped in the Speed Force. And it's crazy because as he's falling in, he's preparing himself to go through all of that again. But this time around when he gets there, it's here where he finds the entire Flash family. And with them coming here, it was actually Bart's idea in order to keep everyone safe, but he had got the idea from when Wally was trapped in the Speed Force and sent there by Abracadabra. But also while they're there, they kind of have this moment to where Kid Flash is like, well, you know, don't tell nobody I said this, but you know, we could just stay here and you know, let all that stuff out there just happen out there. But then of course Wally's like, nah bro, we gotta go back there and save these people. Because like even if they did, it wouldn't be but a matter of time until the Darkest Knight figured out where they were and he would come looking for them. And I'm pretty sure at some point Kid Flash was like, oh, you know I was playing, man, I didn't mean that. But even still, if you think about it, like at the same time, like had Wally not come through with the Mobius chair in the portion of Crisis energy that he has, like these guys would have been stuck here. And so really all these guys were counting on Wally and he came through. But then it's kind of funny when Wally tells Barry to lead the way, and then Barry responds like, nah, I think you got it covered. And really like the ending of SpeedMetal reminds me of that Kanye song off of Graduation, Big Brother. Like that song just really feels like the dynamic between Wally and Barry in this moment. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can head to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.